Okay, right. I think this is working now. Just spent like half an hour trying to get this thing to work, but yeah. Hello and welcome to the track breakdown of this month's exclusive track. So, yeah, just wanted to run through everything on this track, go into all the details about how I've done it. It's a pretty simple track actually. It's not too complicated, but I think the key here with this track is in the execution, and I wanted to get into the idea behind the track and the ethos of the mix being a creative element of the track as well, if that makes sense. Yeah, that's pretty much it. But yeah, before I do, thanks a lot for being a patron still, or if you're a new patron, welcome. And I hope you've all been learning things from these tutorials, and yes, they're going to continue in the future as well. So make sure you smash that like and subscribe button. Or don't, please don't. Okay, so I guess the first thing I started with was the break. So I was pretty inspired by like Hazard and early Noisia with this tune, and I started with this Abbey Road 70s drummer kit, which is just a contact library. I think it's included in Complete 10. And the general idea was to just have a break that is being run through one chain completely, that's not single shots and mixed in different channels. I wanted to just process it all through one giant chain, basically, and see how that sounded, and see if I could get that to work in a mix. So I'll play you the break, just on its own without any stuff on it. Obviously, it's pretty quiet here, so I'm gonna just put the first stage, which is, well, the first stage is a gate, which is this guy, and then that's running into a compressor, which is obviously doing quite a lot here, but this is just generally bringing up the volume. So the actual kit, I think it's this tight kit. And what I did first was I took out all of the room noise on the kit mics and also dialed back the overheads. I think default it's around here. Oop. Which is obviously pretty noisy. And as I was running everything into one chain, I didn't want it to be too reverby and wet going into the chain, because I knew I was going to be adding loads of compression, loads of EQ, stuff like that. So first thing I did, took out all the room mic that's in here, turned down the overhead a bit as well, and then on the bus I completely took out the reverb, so there's some reverb on here too. So I took that out. And for the actual kit, I didn't really change much. I just, I think with the snare, I pitched it a little bit. Possibly. I might have just left it. I think originally it was up here. Well, that's about it. And then I think I dialed out some of the decay a bit on here too. But that's basically it. And for the pattern of the drums, I did this little thing where, with the ghost hits of the snare, I basically played them off grid. This is a thing that happens quite a lot with Hazard tunes, who's a massive influence. So instead of having just a pretty straight quantized beat like this, I then just move this ghost note over a little bit more. And it kind of drags a bit more, which actually makes a huge difference. So if you're, this happens quite a lot with these ghost hits, you offset them a little bit, you just create a bit more funk in the break. I think Upbeats do this a lot as well in their stuff. So that's just normal, and then off. Sounds a lot funkier to me. And, you know, with live drums, especially like these sort of kits, they sound a lot better when they're not played like exactly on grid. I mean, the kick and the snare and the hat is on grid here, but like the little shuffles and stuff like that, it's always a good idea to play around with the placement of your ghost kicks and stuff, ghost hits. So, the chain. Excuse the pun. We got Pro G. So that's a lot of noise. So it's just tightening up the tails there, so I don't have all that room noise and reverb and stuff like that. And as it's running straight into a compressor, which is dialed in pretty aggressively here. It's even clipping a little bit. But yeah, thought it sounded cool. Really raw. Lots of attitude with that. And then the next stage was some EQ. So I've got some pretty... I mean, these are only small adjustments, like 3-4 dB. So this one's the main sort of part of this EQ. It's quite a roomy, boxy frequency, so I've dipped that. I've accentuated some of the mids and the highs, and then low cut, and then boosted as well. So without EQ, with EQ, there you go. And then another EQ straight afterwards. I think this is a filter actually that just comes in later on. Yeah, I think that's just a filter. Comes in later on. And then next thing, some saturation. So this is pushing up the treble band and the bass a little bit, and then just left the mids where they are. Just the warm tape drive. Saturation, always good. And then we got another compressor. It's the Wolf compressor by Goodhertz. It's a really cool compressor. I really love using this compressor quite a lot. It's very analog sounding, and yeah, it's got some cool little presets and stuff like that you can do, but I've just upped the attack a little bit, so it's not, well, it's just letting those transients through. 50% compression, a little bit of wow, which I'm not sure why I've left that on, but oh well. And then next stage is trash. But this might be a preset that I've tweaked, punch and lift. So without. And the reason I've added this on is because with the previous EQ, it's actually left quite a huge curve in the middle, and I wanted to add a bit more of that back through saturation and distortion here. And also on the kick, I wanted the kick to sound a bit more interesting, I guess. So with this distortion, if you listen to the kick specifically, there's almost like a little purr on the kick, which sounds really cool to me. And then there's just this dynamic section here, which it's kind of compressing a little bit, and it's just bringing up towards the tail of the sample just to bring back that room and that live feel back into it. Okay, so then after that, got an EQ. Boosting up this area. So I boosted here. So I've boosted this twice essentially, but I've boosted this after the distortion. It's always good to EQ before and after each instance of especially saturation and distortion, because there's interesting elements and harmonics that those, specifically distortion and saturation, it adds harmonics that might be a lot more interesting. But if you EQ before the distortion, then it changes the dynamic of the sound quite a bit. Whereas if you're EQing after, you're just tweaking what the saturation and distortion has added. So it's always good to be EQing before and after. Then finally, transient processor. Just adding that click back onto the kick and the snare. And I've also upped the release a little bit, so this is without and with. I think I used this to actually combat later on in the mix when I added a few more elements, like especially the bass. I wanted to add more of a click on those drums just so they were pushing through a bit more, because this is essentially all being run through this glue compressor here, like the whole tune, and then it's going into some heavy limiting as well. And that's just mainly to, like I was saying earlier about the mix and using it creatively, I wanted it to sound old. I wanted it to sound like organic and live, and having everything being run into this top-down approach. So with limiting and compression, it's just, yeah, adding a lot of attitude, and really to combat that, I've added this transient processor just so that it's the kick and the stereo just constantly pushing through and pushing everything out the way, basically. Everything's being sidechained anyway, but yeah, it's probably not really necessary to do that here, but I did it anyway, because it sounds cool, and that's the most important thing. But finally, I have no sound, and I'm not sure why. Oh, because I'm on the wrong thing. And then just a little 1 dB lift here on the snare. Nothing too crazy, but that's literally the break, and that just runs through the entire tune, and then I've just got little edits of that. And I was thinking the snare was a bit lacking, so what I did was I added this, hold on, let me unmute all of my automation clips here. Oh dear. Actually, I'll just mute the bass. So I added the second layer to the snare. Sounds like this. It's got some ring modulation on, without and with, and then dialed in the sample fade in time and out time, just to create this cool, it's the original sample, and then just create this cool little layer on the snare drum. So without that layer, with, and that's just got some EQ on it. It's just dipping out those harsh high-end frequencies. Bit of reverb just to place it in the mix a bit more. I do that quite a lot with these short sounds. It's good to give it a bit of room and a bit of depth in the mix. And then final thing was a bit more EQ, just because of the ring mod. It's added these harmonics which are really resonant, and they can sound really cool when you're layering with drums. But yeah, I just controlled those a little bit more here so they weren't too piercing. And that's basically it. There's an open hat here, just being EQ'd a little bit. And there's some more little open hats that come in further on as the track progresses. It's always good to be adding these little textures in the background. It's just an open hat, and then there's this little thing which is a Coke bottle, actually. Little Foley noise that comes in here. I like using these Foley samples for percussion because they just sound a bit more organic and interesting, really. So that's just, I think it's filtered. Yeah, just a little cut off, taking off that top end. What else have we got down here? This is effects stuff. As for drums, I don't think there's much else here. I think... Ah, here we go. There's a top loop. So that comes in later on. This is from the Patreon sample pack, actually. So I just EQ'd it. I've... let's go into this, actually. So I've, yeah, high cut. Taken off that top end, just rolled it off there, and then dipped the 8K region. It's quite piercing, as you can see. Lifted the 700 sort of area, which is usually not what I do. I'd usually have this EQ completely, like, reversed almost. And this area dipped, but I really liked the character of these hats here. Then I got a transient processor straight afterwards. Let's just keeping the attack under control. Then Uber mod. It's adding in just a little bit of a stereo texture. It might not really even be doing that much here. Not very necessary, but there you go. And then what else have we got? Yeah, I think for the drums, that's basically it. So the main focus is just on this chain, this huge chain that I've got. This guy down here, and yeah, it's just running everything through that chain, and it works. It's a good technique for these kind of, you know, sample libraries and stuff like that. As long as you're keeping everything under control at the beginning, so you're starting with a pretty dry sound, then that can sound really cool once you've added all your effects and stuff like that. Alright, next thing is the bass, which sounds like this. Ooh. So this is Serum. Oh. Select the right pattern, shall we? Where are you? There you are. This is from the sample pack. This is The Morning After Spice Magic, actually. That's my local Indian takeaway, if you don't really know what that means. So this patch is pretty complicated, actually. Let's just start it off with sine waves, and then it's a combination of this noise layer, which is being automated in, level of the noise is being automated in afterwards, and then this initial oscillator, which is just a sine wave, but it's running into this really resonant band pass filter. And then there's a second oscillator, which is pitched up. So I do this a lot with my bass noises. I'll have the second oscillator pitched up to a different harmonic, and you can create some really cool tonal changes and stuff like that. So here, you know, you can create some cool textures and stuff like that. And I had the same approach here like I did with the drums, is that I wanted to have something that was just all being run through one chain and was all done in one instance of Serum, which is more of a challenge, but also it's something I like to do a lot, because I think when you're running everything, so something that's not split off into different frequency bands, you can get some really cool, interesting sounds that you wouldn't get if you were just running everything into different effects. So if you split your lows and you just had like a clean sub and then some mids which are a bit distorted and then some high end, but if you run all of that into one chain, which you can kind of do at the end, you can get some super cool results, and that's what I've done here. So I'll go through the chain. So that's just the actually, I'll go through the patch first because that makes more sense. So yeah, it's these oscillators and then this band pass filter. So this first LFO is linked to wavetable position of these guys, the oscillators, and the cutoff of this bandpass filter. But that's just an envelope mode, so it just hits that first, that first hit, and then it doesn't continue. Next thing is LFO 2, which I'm not sure. I think this is doing stuff on effects, maybe. Or maybe it's... Ah, that's the master tune, so this is just like a pitch. So that's just like a envelope, yep, on the pitch of the synth. So I'm trying to drink more, so I don't have a horrible voice. What's this guy? This is the cutoff again. Is that the cutoff? Oh, that's weird. This is also going to the cutoff, but I'm not sure why. I think it's just duplicated. But it's doing the same thing, so that's fine. And then that's running into the level of oscillator A, and then anything in effects? No. Okay, and then this oscillator 4 is the level of oscillator B, and the wavetable position 2, but it's delayed. So if it came in straight away, it sounded like that. But this is what the main focus of the tune is. As you can see, I've got a lot of different instances of Serum, and these are all just variations of this speed of this LFO on the second oscillator. So like this guy. I also have another oscillator automating the noise, so those two are like playing with each other within the preset, basically. And this guy. And this. And those are all literally the same patch, but I've just changed the speed of, where were we? Yeah, oscillator 4 and which one's this one? Oscillator 8. This is the one that's linked to the level of the noise of well, yeah, the level of the noise. Oh no, I can't remember what I was on. I think it was that. Yeah, and then for effects, I'll turn all these off so you can hear what it sounds like without. A bit of distortion, soft clip. And then this EQ, which cuts all that top end off, and it comes in here on the first LFO. It's yeah, it sort of hits on the first bar and then pulls down. Then French low pass filter. I'll put the compressor under so it's loud enough. So this it's a very convoluted preset, so this is obviously and you can't really label these LFOs, so it's hard to. Right, there we go. So 7 is linked to this birth of French LP, the low pass, and that, once again, it's on envelope mode, so it just hits for that first stab and then just continues on. And then just a multi-band compressor at the end, and I've brought up these the high end here and the mids as well because it gets lost. So with the compressor, that's basically it. And then we got the effects chain. So then this is running into effects chain, obviously. What's this? This is just a filter that comes in later on. Okay. Is it? Oh my, this is a confusing project. Okay, first thing is just a dip here at the top. There's these really nasty resonances here that I've just softened up, but I've also brought those down later on. So I did that. This is the filter, which comes in later on in the track. And then next thing, overdrive. So this isn't actually adding any amplification, but it kind of is. It's just like a saturation thing. It just levels everything and clips it. I've just left that on default, so this is without. And then with. More. Oh, yeah, that's a weird thing that happens if you take your finger off the note too early. Then the resonant, one of the resonance knobs is left at like full whack, so it does that. Not very nice. So yeah, funny little thing that happens. Okay, so the next EQ. So these two big notches are taking out those two nasty, like horrible resonances. You can see. Yeah. Those two guys. And then I'm really ramping up this node here and the mids, which is counterintuitive to what I usually do. I usually pull this area down completely, and it's a nightmare for muddiness, but once again, this links into that mix idea of it being creative, and it's just being raw and just in your face and brash. And as there's not really many other elements in the track, I can do that here because, you know, this is where your kick and snare would be, and well, not your kick, your snare, and then like other little synthy bits and bobs. But because there's not really anything like that in this track, it's literally centered around this kick and snare and bass, and then I could just really have that bass occupy the whole spectrum. Then reverb. So this is the reverb that's coming in. So this is the automation clip here for that reverb. So I'm just having it so the tail just really comes in and then gives this cool effect. I like doing this a lot with stuff. So the way it interacts with the break. I think I've messed that preset up a bit too much. I'm going to reopen the project. Okay, change the movement accidentally. But yeah, so that reverb tail is basically just being automated to come in and then controlled, so then it just dips out straight away, and that's just gives it a cool effect. I do that quite a lot with especially smaller bass noises, and yeah, it just creates a bit more interest. Okay, where were we? Here we go. Alrighty. So the next thing I have after that reverb is just cutting out all the side information in the lows. Boosting the mids up here again, and just literal little notch here in the sub. That's not really necessary. I think I just put that in just to. So this is a good example. As this is running into like a compressor here, I'll do this here. So what I was saying earlier about running these sounds, which are just completely done in one instance and not splitting off all your frequency bands, and running it into a compressor or whatever, you can boost all these nodes and then get interesting textures. And then the way the harmonics interact with each other is completely different than if you were splitting everything. And it's also very quick and lazy, so that works too. Another EQ, I tend to do this a lot. I'll just add EQs, and I don't really have these ultra complicated EQs. I just like to see the frequency spectrum and then like add another EQ. Once I've made my decisions with one EQ, I'll add another EQ and then maybe fix them, or not fix them, but you know, I can visualize what that EQ did a little bit over my head, so that's why I have so many EQs. But yeah, what else have I got here? So this is just a little 3-band, low, medium, high, boost, literally, yeah, barely even 2 dB boosts here, and that's going to crystallizer. I think this is just an effect that gets pulled in. Ah, yeah, it's here. It's in the intro. So just creating that cool texture on the top. And then next thing after that is this compressor. So it's really just flattening everything. Once again, it's clipping a little bit here, just saturating, but... But I really like the sound of that in this track specifically. And then finally, the last stage is this this EQ, which is just taking out a couple of frequencies that I wasn't really a huge fan of. And it's also, there's a couple of dynamic bands here. Well, there's 4 dynamic bands here, and this is a feature I'm using a lot. If you haven't got Pro Q3, just get it. It's honestly the best EQ you can get, in my opinion. So, just got this band here that's just pulling the low end a bit. One, just controlling that node that I boosted pretty extremely before. There's this guy. Just a nasty ring. This guy. Once again, nasty ring. Another nasty ring. And then this, just keeping that 4K region under control a bit more. Without EQs like this. There you go. And that's the bass chain. So all of these guys, they're just different variations where I've changed the speed of the LFOs relating to like the level and the placement of the different movements, basically. So like this, I think this is the second drop, this one. So I've just got the level hitting every bar, and then the level of this second oscillator in triplets. Creates a cool vibe. And yeah. So... Okay, so I liked the idea of that bassline changing every, you know, every 32 or whatever, or 16 bars. Just for a bit of variance, and aside from that, there's not a huge amount going on in the background. There's just some effects stuff, so I think, let's go in the intro, let's have a look at that. So I had this sample, which is just like I just got this instrumental sample pack with tons of random shit that I've pitched up. I've just cut it so it's repeating every bar. It's obviously very harsh there, sorry about that. But first thing is filter. Then I have this disperser on it, and it just creates a bit more texture. Then vintage verb. So without and with. Then Echo Boy, bit of delay. I'll mute all the After Effects actually. And then an EQ, just dipping all that low end muddiness off. Then I've got this gross beat, which is a volume envelope basically. I wanted that separate to the sidechain, and I didn't want to set up a whole new sidechain just for that thing, so I just added this volume shaper on it. Then this is the main EQ, which is dipping all of that horribleness I was playing earlier. And then Crystallizer. So doing some cool pitch stuff, and that's just being automated in and out. What else have we got? We've got this, which I think is like a It's like a Foley recording of a museum or something. Put some ring mod on. So it's got this horrible fuzzy texture. Dipped all the low end out. And then put a bit of reverb on that. What else have we got? This guy. It's a cool pitch thing. Just pitch that up. Some EQ. That's about it there. This guy. Okay. What did I do here? I think it's just from Hieroglyphic sample pack. Yeah. Just a cool boing. And then I just put that through Echo Boy and Crystallizer. Sound toys, again, get these, they're just incredible. You know, it's just really cool. Just adding these upper layers of texture, so you don't just have the one noise. You've got all these cool background stereo things going on. What else have we got? This guy. Ah, that's just a sub hit. Not much going on there. Just a bit of EQ. Just making that mono. This is from the sample pack. Bit of EQ on that. And then... Oh. That was weird. Okay. Too much fuckery going on. And then...
Dr. Pierce returns with an offbeat ditty called The Two Note.
Vocal sample. Mute all of these guys.
Dr. Pierce returns with an offbeat ditty called The Two Note. It gets its name from the...
So the first thing I did, I added a vocodec.
Dr. Pierce returns with an offbeat ditty called The Two Note. It gets its name from the bouncing bass. Dr. Pierce returns with an offbeat ditty called The Two Note.
This is just adding a bit of texture. It's like pitched down the vocals in the background, and you can kind of hear it. I've automated it so it comes in a bit more towards the end of...
The Two Note.
There you go.
Dr.
It might have even been one of the presets that I tweaked. I think this backing voice is one. I tweaked that a bit, and then EQ.
Dr. Pierce returns with an offbeat ditty called...
And then reverb.
Dr. Pierce...
Giving it a bit of room, bit of compression.
Dr. Pierce returns with an...
Not necessary, but good to have that in case it peaks. It cuts off those peaks.
Dr. Pierce returns with an offbeat...
Another EQ. Then this is running into another channel which has got Echo Boy in it.
Dr. Pierce returns with an offbeat ditty called The Two Note. It gets its name.
And that's the delay. And that's it. That's basically it for the intro. What else have we got? That's literally it. It's a very simple track. It's all about this like dynamic of the kick and the break and the bass. And it shows you don't really need a huge load of stuff to really fill out a track. You know, adding loads and loads of different elements and textures sometimes isn't the right thing to do. And just letting those bass parts or cool drums just sing out and just let them speak for themselves. You don't have to, you know, muddy everything up with other stuff and having everything change every 2 bars or whatever. But obviously it's great to have variants and it's good to have little textures in the background to keep things interesting, but the complicated parts of this track it's literally in these bass patches, which are just a bit yeah, they're just a bit convoluted, but they sound cool. And yeah, it was more of an exercise for me just to see if I could do that and make it work in a track, and there you go. What else have we got that I could talk about in this track? Okay, yeah, originally the idea was the sidechain that in the video that I put up for you, I think it might have been last month, about having just a single peak controller. I think that was the original sidechain that I had, but I redid it with the new technique that I showed you guys. And I just played that in. So cool tip, this is what everyone's doing. As soon as your sidechain is triggered by MIDI, you can trigger it early. And you get this interesting sort of vibe. Here I didn't do that because I wanted it to sound a bit older, really. But the new modern way is you basically just offset your sidechain slightly. So like this. And that's pretty much what everyone's doing right now. So that's a cool little tip if you're not doing that. What else is there? I think the only other thing I didn't mention was just the filter that's on the bass. It's just a bit of a EQ here. It's just a low pass filter. It just closes and then just opens up. So then the rest of the progression of the bass can sing out a bit more. But yeah, that's literally it. There's a couple of effects stuff in the background. Yeah, that's just the oscillator, second oscillator pitched up on that one. Right, so the final chain was just this compressor, the glue. You know, max like 7 dB of compression. It's got the high pass filter on it. So it's only compressing above 80 Hertz. And then it's running into Pro L, so it's a transparent limiter. So having 2 limiters is really good if you want to achieve a big loud. You get one limiter that's like a transparent limiter. Dial that in a little bit. So here I've got it on plus 1.5 gain. Full attack, low release, and then you have another limiter with a different style on it, or a different character. You can use other limiters too. I just use Pro L because it's the best, but you know. Then I've got the modern setting on this one afterwards, and then it dials it in a bit louder, and then you're not choking everything through one limiter. You're doing it in stages is really good for achieving loudness without choking your track and making it sound really bad. So here I was just going for minus 4.5. I didn't want to push it any more than that. I could have done, but I don't see the point. It was already pretty loud and mid-rangey anyway. So that's pretty much it for this tune. So what I was going to do, I was going to put the 2 chains, so the drum chain and the mixer chain on excuse me, on the Patreon, so that you guys can download it, and then you can apply it to your own stuff. If you can't use FL chain, sorry, I understand a lot of you aren't using that sort of FL Studio, so you're just going to have to, copy you don't have to copy all the EQ settings, you just have to mainly have like a compressor at the start, bit of saturation, another little compressor, a little bit more distortion, and then maybe a transient processor at the end. And then you can EQ depending on what you want to do. And then for the bass, the bass.
Dr. Pierce
Oh dear. I'm very sorry about that. It's a bit of a nightmare. Okay, so yeah, that's basically the tune. There's not a huge amount going on, but it shows that you don't have to do all these crazy techniques and stuff just to create a cool tune. And the next track I was gonna do a rundown of was one of my previous tracks, which is a bit more in depth and has more like producey stuff in there. So keep an eye out for that one. Some more samples this month, and give away a few of the chains from here, and a couple of other things too coming. So big up. Thanks for watching. Thanks for being a Patreon still. And peace out. Bye.